The sun sagged low in the sky, bleeding burnt orange and dusky pink across the horizon, casting long, stretching shadows over the dry, patchy grass of our tired yard. From the kitchen window, I watched Mike and Steve hunched over the open hood of my old Ford, their movements steady and methodical, silhouettes against the fading light. The heavy scent of oil, gasoline, and sweat drifted through the open screen door, thick and intrusive, mingling with the still, heavy air of the house that had once been so full of life. There had been a time, not so long ago, though it now felt like another lifetime, when Tom would have been out there too, his laughter booming across the yard, a cold beer in one hand, a smudge of grease streaked across his cheek. He would have had a joke for every stubborn bolt and a story for every scraped knuckle. But those days had slipped away like sand through my fingers, leaving behind only the hollow clatter of tools and the muted grunts of exertion. Please share your thoughts in the comment section below. Each of your shares is not only a motivation for us but also contributes to spreading value to the community. If you find this content useful, don't forget to watch the whole video, like, subscribe, and share with someone you think needs to hear this too. Inside, the house was silent, save for the soft hum of the fridge and the occasional groan of the old floorboards under my shifting weight. Tom was here somewhere, but not really, not in any way that mattered. The bottle had swallowed the man he used to be, leaving behind a shell too broken and bitter to recognize. As I gripped the edge of the counter, torn between aching gratitude for Mike and Steve's kindness and a sharp, gnawing bitterness I couldn't shake, a question burned at the back of my mind. What was the real price of their help? What debts would come due when the last bolt was tightened and the last tool was put away? The setting sun threw a last glimmer of light through the window, catching on the dust motes floating aimlessly in the air, tiny drifting reminders of everything we had lost. My name is Elena, and at 58 years old, life had blindsided me in ways I could never have imagined. I had spent decades believing I understood the shape of my world, the rhythms of my marriage, the man I had pledged my life to. But somewhere along the way, without warning, everything had shifted beneath my feet. My husband, Tom, the man who used to command every room he entered with his booming laughter and infectious energy, had slowly faded into a hollow, broken version of himself. Where once he had been a beacon, the center of every gathering, he was now just a hunched figure slouched in the battered recliner, bathed in the dim, flickering light of the television. His hand was almost always curled around a bottle, his eyes glassy and unfocused, as if trying to find his way back to a world he no longer believed he belonged to. I would catch glimpses of the man he used to be in the rare curve of a smile or the flash of a memory in his gaze. But those moments were fleeting, swallowed almost instantly by a vast, consuming emptiness. Our home, once a living, breathing testament to laughter, love, and dreams shared late into the night, had withered into something unrecognizable. It had become a mausoleum of memories, every creaky floorboard and dusty photograph a painful reminder of what had been lost. The walls seemed to sigh with the weight of it, and the silence pressed against me like a heavy, invisible hand, suffocating in its finality. In the midst of this slow unraveling, Mike and Steve had emerged as my unlikely lifelines. They had been Tom's closest friends, brothers not by blood but by bond, forged over years of beer-soaked evenings, fishing trips, and hard-earned trust. Now their visits, once occasions for laughter and wild stories, carried a different, quieter purpose. Mike, with his rough, oil-stained hands and a mechanic's easy confidence, bore a rugged charm that made him seem almost indestructible. There was a steadiness about him that I found myself leaning toward, often before I even realized it. And Steve, dear Steve, with his easy, lopsided grin and a voice that could smooth the sharpest edges of my grief, brought a lightness that for brief moments made me believe that maybe all was not yet lost. His presence was like a balm against the ever-present ache that had rooted itself deep in my chest. They came not just out of loyalty to the man Tom had once been, but for me. I could see it in the way their eyes lingered, full of unspoken worry, in the way they stayed a little longer each time, as if afraid of what might happen if they left me alone with the ghosts that now haunted this house. And though I was grateful beyond words, some small, frightened part of me wondered how long their kindness could stretch before it, too, wore thin under the weight of all we had lost. The car, an aging, battered Ford that Tom and I had proudly purchased back in the golden days of our marriage, had finally chosen today to die, its spirit giving out with a pitiful cough and a final, ominous silence. I stood there alone, the keys limp in my hand, staring at the motionless wreck with a hollow ache growing inside me. With Tom slipping further and further from the man I once knew. He was in no condition to even attempt to help. It was just me now, stranded not only on this dusty stretch of road but in a life that seemed to be falling apart one broken piece at a time. That's when Mike and Steve appeared, like an answer to a prayer I hadn't dared utter aloud. They pulled up in their truck, tools clanking and spirits unshaken, wearing easy smiles that belied the weight of the task ahead. They didn't hesitate, just rolled up their sleeves and set to work, determined to breathe life back into the machine that Tom could no longer save. Their hands moved with a surety I envied, coaxing hope out of metal and wire the way I once tried to coax it out of our crumbling life. As I watched them, a tangled storm of emotions churned in my chest. Gratitude, sharp and aching, for their kindness, their loyalty, and bitterness too, an almost unbearable grief for what had been lost. For Tom. For the life we had built, now slipping away from me as inevitably and carelessly as sand through desperate fingers. The sun sagged lower in the sky, bleeding gold and crimson across the horizon, casting long, mournful shadows that seemed to stretch out forever. Mike, ever steady, paused to wipe the sweat from his brow with the back of his hand, leaving a thick smear of grease across his forehead, a badge of honor for the battle he was fighting on my behalf. "Almost got it, Elena," he called out. His voice rough with exertion but tinged with a quiet, stubborn triumph that sparked something dangerously close to hope in me. Beneath the car, Steve, ever the relentless optimist, stuck his hand out and gave me a playful thumbs up, his grin flashing even under the weight of the day. I smiled back automatically, but inside something twisted. Watching them, their easy camaraderie, their unwavering resolve, was a painful reminder of a closeness that once belonged to Tom and me. Their shared laughter, their wordless understanding, it all carved a hollow space inside me, where love and partnership used to live. A space I wasn't sure could ever be filled again. It wasn't just about the car anymore. It hadn't been for a long time. This wasn't merely a matter of bolts and wires and a dead battery. It was about something much larger, something far more fragile. It was about patching the cracks that had splintered through my life, through the life Tom and I had built together, now crumbling around us faster than I could catch the pieces. As Mike and Steve worked tirelessly under the blistering afternoon sun, I stood frozen in the doorway, feeling like a ghost haunting the wreckage of a life I no longer recognized. My mind drifted as I watched them, pulled away by a relentless tide of fear and uncertainty. What would happen once the car roared back to life? Once the hood slammed shut and the tools were packed away? It wasn't just the looming question of how I'd afford the repairs, though that worry gnawed at me like a starving thing. It was the heavier, more invisible cost. The emotional debt. The kindness they'd given without asking. The loyalty they offered without hesitation. How could I ever repay something so deeply human, so heartbreakingly rare? And more than that, was there even enough left of me to try? Mike and Steve moved with easy rhythm, their friendship evident in every unspoken gesture. Shirts abandoned to the relentless heat, their skin shone slick with sweat, muscles straining as they wrestled with rusted bolts and stubborn parts. The air inside the garage was stifling, thick with the scent of oil, hot metal, and something sweeter. Hope maybe, though I didn't dare name it aloud. Their laughter rose above the hum of work, warm and alive, a stark, almost cruel contrast to the silence that choked the halls of my house. A silence filled with words unsaid, apologies unspoken, wounds left untreated. Feeling helpless, desperate to contribute in any small way, I brought them cold beers, the bottles sweating in my trembling hands. It was a meager offering, a pitiful attempt to bridge the growing gulf between what I could give and what they deserved. They accepted them with easy smiles and thanks, no expectation, no judgment, which only made the shame burn hotter under my skin. As they finished up, tightening the last bolts and wiping their hands on dirty rags, a sickening realization settled over me like a heavy shroud. I had no money to pay them, not a dime to my name. The humiliation of it made my chest ache, not just from the immediate crisis, but from the crushing knowledge of how far we had fallen, how far I had fallen. Once, Tom and I had been the ones offering help, laughing in the sunlight, whole and strong. Now, all I could do was stand there, empty-handed, feeling the weight of my failures press down until it was hard to even lift my head. Mike wiped his grease-stained hands on an old rag, the fabric as worn and battered as the day itself, before looking at me with a smile so genuine it nearly shattered the fragile wall I had built around my heart. "Don't worry about it, Elena. We're here for you," he said, his voice low and steady, carrying a weight of kindness I didn't know how to hold without feeling it might crush me. Beside him, Steve nodded, his easygoing grin softening into something more tender, more profound. His eyes, bright and earnest, locked with mine for a fleeting moment, and in them I saw an anchor, something steady and unwavering in a world that had become so terrifyingly unstable. Their presence, their simple, unspoken solidarity, made me feel a little less invisible, a little less adrift in the wreckage of my life. And yet, even as their warmth wrapped around me like a balm, a darker thought coiled at the edges of my mind, refusing to be ignored. What would be the cost of their kindness? Nothing in life came without a price anymore. Hadn't I learned that lesson well enough? I stood there frozen, watching them gather their scattered tools, my heart warring between gratitude and a gnawing fear I couldn't name. The afternoon had slipped away unnoticed, swallowed by the hum of work and the soft murmur of conversation. And now, as the sun bled into the horizon, stretching long, mournful shadows across the dry, cracked yard, I felt the heavy pull of reality settle back over me. The car was fixed. The immediate crisis was over. But the deeper wounds, the ones inside me, inside Tom, inside the ghost of the life we once shared, those remained raw and festering. Mike, with his rugged charm and steady hands that could bring a dead engine roaring back to life, had always been a figure of reassurance in my world. Even when Tom began to slip away, first in small, almost imperceptible ways, and then all at once, Mike's quiet strength never faltered. And Steve, with his effortless humor and that lopsided grin that could crack through even the heaviest silence, had a way of making the unbearable feel, if only for a moment, lighter. They weren't just Tom's friends anymore. Somewhere along the line, they had become my lifeline too, the last threads holding me together when everything else threatened to unravel. As they tossed the last of their tools into the bed of Mike's truck and prepared to leave, I found myself standing there, helpless, wondering about the future with a dread that tasted bitter in my mouth. The car was running, yes. But what about us? What about the broken man slumped inside the house, nursing a bottle like it was the only thing left worth holding on to? What about the woman I had once been? Bright, hopeful, foolishly in love, now reduced to someone who measured victories in running engines and borrowed strength. Tom, the man who had once made me laugh until my sides ached, who had promised me forever under a blanket of stars, was now just a ghost haunting the edges of my life. His descent had been slow at first, a missed dinner here, a forgotten birthday there, until one day, it was like the person I loved had simply disappeared, leaving only an aching shell in his place. Mike and Steve's kindness today was more than just a good deed. It was a living, breathing reminder of what used to be. A time when help was offered with open hands and open hearts, when laughter filled the air instead of silence and regret. Those memories hung around me now like faded photographs, beautiful and painful all at once, whispering of a past that felt increasingly out of reach, a life that had slipped through my fingers before I even realized I was losing it. And as I watched their truck rumble away into the deepening dusk, I stood there on the cracked driveway, clutching those echoes of better days to my chest, praying I could somehow find the strength to keep moving forward, even when everything inside me was begging to give up. I thanked them again, though the words barely escaped my lips, nothing more than a broken whisper swallowed by the heavy, oil-scented air. I was overwhelmed by their generosity, by their unwavering presence, by the bittersweet ache of needing them more than I could admit even to myself. Mike stepped closer and placed a hand on my shoulder, rough and calloused from years of hard work. His touch lingered for just a fraction longer than necessary, sending an unexpected, disorienting shiver racing down my spine. It wasn't romantic, not exactly, but it was a human connection I hadn't felt in what seemed like a lifetime. Steve's gaze found mine and held it, steady and unflinching. His expression open, patient, carrying a silent promise I didn't know how to interpret, or maybe I simply didn't dare. As they climbed into Mike's battered pickup and pulled away, I stood there rooted in the doorway, arms crossed tightly over my chest, watching the taillights dwindle and finally vanish into the dusk. The thick summer air clung to me, heavy with the smell of oil, gasoline, and sweat, the tangible remnants of their presence, the intimacy of their work. It felt almost sacrilegious to breathe it in, to hold it inside me, when all it did was remind me how hollow everything else had become. Their laughter, their easy camaraderie, had filled the garage, spilling over into my broken world with a warmth that made the emptiness inside my home all the more unbearable. The question hung in the air around me like the dust motes spinning lazily in the fading evening light. What would be the true cost of their kindness? Was it just the price of a car repair, easily brushed aside with a handshake and a few grateful words? Or was it something deeper? A reckoning, a silent, growing debt that would forever remind me of how far we'd fallen, how much we had lost. Could kindness patch over the gaping holes in my life? Or would it simply serve as a painful mirror, reflecting all the things I could no longer fix? Later that evening, after Tom had stumbled into bed, reeking of cheap whiskey and regret, I found myself desperate for something. Anything, to stave off the loneliness that pressed in around me like a suffocating fog. The house, once filled with laughter and the rhythmic noise of shared living, now felt like a tomb. Only the soft hum of the refrigerator broke the oppressive silence. On impulse, driven by a need I couldn't quite name, I sent a message to Mike and Steve, inviting them back for a drink. It was a simple gesture on the surface, a neighborly act of hospitality, but beneath it lurked a raw, silent plea. Don't leave me alone tonight. When they returned, the three of us settled into the dim, too-quiet living room, our beers sweating onto the battered coffee table, the light from a single old lamp casting long, uncertain shadows against the walls. For a while we talked about safe things, work, cars, the relentless heat, but it didn't take long for the conversation to slip into darker waters. They spoke of Tom, the man he used to be, the friend they missed, the slow and painful unraveling they had witnessed with helpless frustration. Their words were hesitant, heavy, their sighs betraying the hurt they tried to swallow down. They avoided my eyes as if the truth was too sharp, too raw to look at directly. And then, almost without meaning to, I broke open. The words tumbled out, trembling and fragile, and once they started, I couldn't stop them. I confessed the things I had kept hidden even from myself. The stack of unpaid bills gathering dust on the kitchen counter, the savings account that was little more than a cruel joke now, the nights spent lying awake, terrified of what would come next. I thanked them again, my voice cracking under the weight of emotion, not just for the car, but for showing up, for being there when Tom couldn't, for offering me some sliver of hope on a day that had started with nothing but despair. Their presence, their listening, their quiet, steady support was more healing than anything I had dared hope for. But even as I clung to it, part of me feared what strings might eventually be attached, what this fragile connection might cost, or whether in the end it would be yet another thing I couldn't afford to lose. Mike, ever the one to speak plainly, leaned forward, his gaze intense and unwavering. His voice, though soft, held an undeniable strength, a quiet command that seemed to reach into the very core of my being. "Elena," he began, his words deliberate, each one hanging in the air like a weight. "You know we're here for you, no questions asked. We've got your back no matter what. But there's something you could do to show us your gratitude, something that could benefit all of us. Something that could change everything." His suggestion was a thunderclap in my mind, as unexpected as it was unsettling. It was an offer, a way out, a path toward something unknown, but in my heart I could already feel the tension rising. Desperation and loneliness had hollowed me out, making me yearn for any form of escape, even if it came at a price. Steve, sitting beside me, was silent for a moment, his eyes darting back and forth between Mike and me. His gaze lingered too long on mine, a silent conversation playing out between us, one I wasn't sure I was ready to have. The room seemed to shrink, the weight of their expectations pressing down on me, and for a split second, I thought I might suffocate under the intensity of it all. Mike's proposal hovered in the space between us, unspoken yet undeniable. The possibility of repayment for their kindness, for their support, was now on the table. But at what cost? I could feel it, the pull of temptation, the allure of a way out, and yet the heavy cloud of uncertainty that shadowed my every thought. My chest tightened, a storm of conflicting emotions brewing within me. A strange cocktail of fear and excitement coursed through my veins, the kind that comes when standing on the precipice of something life-altering, something I couldn't yet see clearly but that I knew would change everything if I stepped over the edge. Then Mike's hand found mine, his touch warm, grounding, and unexpectedly gentle. But as his fingers curled around mine, a shiver of something far more complicated than reassurance swept through me. It wasn't just the comfort of his presence, it was the whisper of something deeper, a hidden intensity that I wasn't ready to confront but could not deny. Steve, sensing my inner turmoil, broke the silence. His voice softer now, laced with an unspoken understanding. "Elena," he said, his words carrying a tenderness that made my heart ache. "We care about you. We really do. We want to help, but we also need something in return. It's not just about the car or the money. It's about more than that. It's about us, about feeling needed, about connection. It's about understanding that we're all in this together, that you're not alone." His words were like a balm, soothing the raw, exposed edges of my soul, but at the same time, they stirred something deeper within me. A flutter of unease, of longing, and a quiet desperation I didn't want to face. The silence that followed was thick, oppressive, heavy with the weight of what could come next. I could feel the unspoken agreement hanging between us, a silent pact that I didn't yet fully understand but knew would define the path ahead. The question wasn't whether I was ready, it was whether I could ever be. I could feel the magnetic pull of their presence, like an unseen force drawing me away from the oppressive solitude that had been my constant companion for far too long. It was as if they were offering me a fragile thread of connection, a lifeline to something warmer, more human, in the midst of the cold void I had grown accustomed to. The promise of escape from my aching loneliness hung between us, tantalizing and unreachable, until now. As the night deepened, stretching its shadows across the room, the weight of my decision bore down on me, relentless and suffocating. It was there, looming before me, stark and undeniable. Would I take the plunge, step beyond the boundaries of my solitary existence and into the unknown with them? Would I embrace this raw, uncertain connection, daring to risk the comfort of my solitude? Or would I turn my back on it all, retreating to the safety of my life with Tom, burying myself once again in the quiet, numbing routine of our days? The choice was mine, but I knew deep down that whatever I decided would reverberate far beyond this moment, cascading through our lives and changing everything in ways I couldn't yet comprehend. The implications were profound, a ripple effect that would touch every part of us. In that fragile instant, I understood the true cost of their kindness. It wasn't simply about fixing a broken car or settling an old debt. No, it was so much more than that. It was about the delicate threads of connection we weave in times of vulnerability, the sacrifices we make when our lives are on the line, and the impossible decisions we face when the road ahead is shrouded in uncertainty. Their generosity was a gift, but it came with a price, one that would forever alter the way I saw myself, them, and the world around me. The minutes dragged on, stretching into what felt like an eternity. With each passing second, the choice grew clearer, more inevitable, like the slow descent into a dream that promised both wonder and dread in equal measure. There was no waking from it. Not once the decision was made, not once we crossed that line. The room was thick with tension, as if the very walls were holding their breath, waiting for the storm to break. I led Mike and Steve upstairs, my heart pounding in my chest, each step heavy with the weight of what was about to unfold. Tom lay downstairs, lost to the world in his snoring, blissfully unaware. The house, once familiar and comforting, now felt like a stage, the floorboards creaking beneath our feet as if the house itself was aware of the drama unfolding within its walls. Every step was a reminder of what we were about to do, and the stakes felt impossibly high. In the bedroom, the air was thick with anticipation, as though the very atmosphere was charged with the electricity of what was coming. I stood there, caught between guilt and something else. Something darker, more thrilling, and infinitely more dangerous. A strange sense of empowerment coursed through me, mingling with the fear and excitement that tangled in my chest. We had crossed a threshold, and I wasn't sure if we would ever be able to go back. Turning to them, my voice barely a whisper, I sought some semblance of reassurance, some assurance that this moment, this fragile bond, would remain between us, untouched by the chaos that could follow. This is just between us, right? My words trembled in the stillness of the room, a fragile thread connecting us, even as the world outside threatened to unravel everything. They nodded in unison, their expressions a delicate balance of desire and hesitation, as if they were torn between the pull of their own needs and the weight of the unspoken understanding that had settled between us. The room, once spacious and familiar, seemed to shrink with the gravity of the moment. The walls felt as though they were closing in, narrowing around us to bear witness to the secret we were about to share. Something intimate, something dangerous, that would forever alter the course of our lives. I could hear the rapid beat of my own heart, the rhythmic thump pounding in my ears, as if my very body was preparing for the inevitable storm that was about to break. Mike's gaze was piercing, dark and intense, holding mine with a look that spoke volumes, of yearning, of hunger, but also of something deeper, something raw and undeniable. There was a promise in those eyes, a silent vow that whatever was about to unfold would be something more than either of us could easily walk away from. It was forbidden, like a temptation too strong to resist, yet too dangerous to embrace fully. A part of me trembled, not from fear, but from the power of that promise, the unspoken words that hung thick in the air between us. Steve, standing just beside Mike, brushed his hand lightly against mine, the touch a quiet reassurance that sent a ripple of warmth through my body. It wasn't cold. It was a shiver of anticipation, of something building deep inside me, stirring and awakening a side of me I had long buried beneath the weight of my responsibilities, my past. I drew in a slow, shaky breath, the scent of the room, old wood, faint traces of dust, and the lingering musk of cologne, filling my senses. The air seemed heavy, laden with the unspoken tension of what we were about to do. It was as if time itself had slowed, allowing each passing second to stretch into an eternity. My thoughts were a blur, but one thing was clear. I needed this. I needed something to break free from the hollow ache that had consumed me for so long. I needed to feel seen, to feel wanted, to be alive in a way I hadn't felt in years. I need this, I whispered, the words barely more than a breath, slipping from my lips before I could even stop them. It was more to myself than to them, a quiet confession that I hadn't fully allowed myself to acknowledge. But in that moment they heard it. They understood. Mike's presence seemed to draw closer, filling the space around us with a weight I couldn't escape. He stepped forward, closing the distance between us with a slow, deliberate movement. His eyes never left mine, his intensity undeniable, and when he reached out, his hand found my waist, pulling me gently but firmly toward him. The contact was electric, like a spark igniting something deep within me, something I had thought long extinguished, a fire that had been smothered by years of neglect, a feeling invisible in a life that had slowly drained the passion from my soul. Steve stood just behind, his gaze softer but no less intense, watching with an unreadable expression that spoke of his own conflict. His eyes, though quieter than Mike's, held a storm of emotions. Concern, desire, something more tender, perhaps even protective. When he spoke, his voice was a balm, soothing and gentle, yet it stirred something deeper within me. "We care about you," he said. His words almost a murmur, lost in the heavy, charged air. The sincerity in his tone, the weight of the emotions behind those few simple words, settled deep within me, a comfort and a challenge all at once. The decision had already been made. Not with words, but with the silent agreement of our bodies drawing closer, of the space between us narrowing as if the universe itself conspired to bring us together in this fragile, fleeting moment. No more hesitation, no more turning back. We were on the edge of something undeniable, something that would either bind us forever or tear us apart. The tension was thick, and yet, in that moment, it felt like the only thing left to do was to give in, to let everything else fall away and surrender to whatever this was becoming. The room, once a silent sanctuary of solitude and sorrow, had transformed, pulsing with an energy that was both foreign and intoxicating. It was as if the very air had shifted, charged with an electric current that made every breath feel heavier, more significant. The shadows that clung to the walls danced with our movements, growing and shrinking with each touch, as if they too were caught up in the swirling storm of emotions around us. The dim light, soft and uncertain, cast a delicate veil over what was about to unfold, a fragile illusion of secrecy and intimacy that made the world outside feel impossibly distant. When Mike's lips met mine, it wasn't just a kiss. It was a question, an invitation, a promise, and an answer all at once. It spoke of everything that had remained unsaid for far too long, of the years I had spent suffocating under the weight of my own unspoken desires. It was a kiss that held the ghosts of my loneliness, of the nights spent yearning for something more than the emptiness I had learned to accept. His lips were warm, insistent, yet tender, as if he was offering something I didn't know I was missing, but had always secretly craved. His touch, firm yet gentle, contrasted sharply with the roughness of his hands, the same hands that had once fixed my car, that had touched the broken pieces of my life in ways I never expected. And now, those hands were touching me in a different way, as if seeking to fix something deeper, something hidden within me that had been lost for far too long. Steve's touch was softer, but no less powerful. His fingers traced delicate patterns along my arms, sending waves of goosebumps rippling through my skin, as if every light touch, every whisper of contact, was igniting a fire deep within me. His kisses were tender, exploratory, as though he were savoring every inch of me, trying to memorize every curve of my face, every tremble of my body. His presence was calming in contrast to Mike's intensity, yet no less overwhelming. Together, they formed a delicate balance of heat and gentleness, pulling me into a place where the past no longer mattered, where the weight of my responsibilities and regrets seemed to vanish into the air. The room seemed to spin around us, the world outside fading into nothingness as the reality of our situation blurred into a haze of need, escape, and reckless longing. The sound of Tom's snoring from downstairs felt like a distant echo, a faint reminder of the life I was momentarily stepping away from, a life that had become so heavy and suffocating that I could hardly remember the last time I felt truly alive. But here, in this room, with these men who had somehow become my lifeline, the present was all that mattered. The weight of Tom, the burden of my past, was momentarily forgotten, replaced by something that felt more real, more tangible, something raw and unspoken, but no less powerful. As we moved together, the layers of our clothes began to fall away, each piece slipping from our bodies like a barrier breaking down, revealing more than just flesh, but the emotions we had been hiding from each other for so long. Every discarded shirt, every unbuttoned pant, was a symbol of the walls we were tearing down, walls that had kept us apart, that had kept me in a cage of my own making. The air around us grew thick with anticipation, each breath shared between us, each touch laden with the weight of a promise that went beyond mere physical release. It was as though we were writing our own story, one that had been waiting to be told for years, one that would redefine everything. And then, amidst it all, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time, a surge of empowerment, a fierce reclaiming of my own body, my own desires. After years of feeling invisible, after being defined by the roles I had played, the dutiful wife, the caretaker of a man lost to his own demons. Here in this moment I was no one's but my own. I wasn't Tom's wife. I wasn't the woman who had spent years pretending to be content in a life that had withered my spirit. Here in this room with these men who had come to mean so much more than I could ever have expected, I was Elena, alive, desired, and in control. Every decision, every movement was mine. For the first time in what felt like forever, I was not just surviving. I was living fully and completely, in a way that only the heart could understand. The night stretched on endlessly, each passing minute weighing heavier than the last, the decision we had made reverberating through every action, altering the very fabric of our relationships. It was not just about the physical act, not just the shared warmth of bodies entwined. It was something far deeper, far more significant. It was about connection. It was about feeling needed and seen, about the fragile yet unbreakable bonds we create in moments of need, when the world seems to crumble around us, and we cling to each other for a sense of purpose, for a reason to keep going. As we lay there, the soft, steady rise and fall of our breathing filling the stillness, the aftermath of our choices settled heavily around us. It was like a blanket that draped itself over us, warm and suffocating at once, a constant reminder of the paths we had chosen. I realized then that the true cost of their kindness, of everything that had brought us to this point, was not just about fixing a broken car or settling an old debt. Those were the surface reasons, the justifications that made it easier to move forward. But the real cost, the price we were all paying, was about the sacrifices we were making, the moments we would never get back, and the paths we were choosing to walk when the road ahead was so uncertain, so unclear. It was about what we were willing to give up, what we were willing to risk in search of something more. The night had already begun to change us, leaving a mark on each of us that could never be erased. It had altered the course of our lives in ways we couldn't yet begin to comprehend, like a pebble dropped in the water, sending ripples outwards, touching everything. What was once simple had become tangled, and though we didn't fully understand the depth of the change, we all felt it. This strange, aching shift that was both exhilarating and terrifying in equal measure. But in that fragile moment, as I lay between them, feeling the warmth of their bodies next to mine, I felt a peace settle over me. It wasn't the kind of peace that comes from the absence of chaos. It was something more profound, more elusive. It was the peace that comes from stepping into the unknown, from making a choice that was reckless and bold, from choosing to live fully instead of simply existing in the shadows. For the first time in what felt like years, I felt alive. Not just a shadow of myself, not just a woman defined by the roles I had been forced to play, but a woman who was finally free to feel, to choose. The night unfolded in a blur of emotions, of sensations that cascaded through me like waves, each one stronger than the last. It was a rebellion against the constraints of my life, a declaration that I would no longer allow myself to be bound by the expectations, the neglect, the silence that had defined my existence for so long. It was a reclaiming of control, even if it was a control born of moral ambiguity. But in the midst of that chaos, in the haze of need and longing, there was clarity. There was a sense of power, of being wanted, of being seen. The physical connection we shared was intense, undeniable, but it was the emotional release that was most profound. It was as though, in those moments, we were shedding the layers of pain, of isolation, of rejection that had been sewn into the fabric of our lives. For those precious hours, I wasn't just Tom's neglected wife. I wasn't a woman left to fade into the background, to be ignored and forgotten. Here in this room with these men who had become unexpected lifelines, I was desired. I was appreciated. And most importantly, I was in control. I was no longer someone's possession, someone's afterthought. I was Elena, whole, strong, and unapologetically present. Mike's touch was like a spark in the darkness, a fire that lit up parts of me I thought had long been extinguished. His hands, rough from years of working on engines, now touched me with a gentleness I had never imagined. It was a tenderness that contrasted so sharply with their usual calloused, work-worn nature. And yet it was exactly what I needed. It was as if he knew exactly where to touch, where to hold, where to soothe the aching parts of me that had long been starved of attention. His kisses were urgent, demanding, yet there was a softness beneath them, a sense of care that both unsettled and calmed me in the same breath. Steve's touch was different, softer, almost reverent, like he was afraid I might break. His fingers traced my skin with a tenderness that made my heart ache, each movement slow and deliberate, as though he was savoring each moment, each sensation. His kisses were light, exploratory, as if he were learning me, memorizing the curves and angles of my face, committing each moment to memory. There was no rush with him, no urgency, just a quiet, careful attention that left me feeling both adored and cherished. The room around us seemed to pulse with the rhythm of our shared breaths, the air thick with the scent of our desires, our needs. It was a heady mixture of sweat, cologne, and something sweeter, something that was impossible to name. It was a dance of shadows and light, where every movement was a promise and a confession, where every touch was an admission of things we had hidden for too long. The space between us was charged, alive with the rawness of what we were experiencing, and in that electric silence, we moved together, not just in physicality but in a shared understanding. We were connected by more than just our bodies. We were connected by our loneliness, our yearning, our desperate need for something to pull us from the emptiness that had defined our lives. In those moments, it wasn't just the act we were sharing. It was a communion, a fragile, fleeting moment where we were no longer defined by the roles the world had imposed on us, but by the simple, undeniable truth that, in this space, we were seen. We were wanted. And we were, for the first time in so long, truly alive. As the night wore on, the layers of our clothes fell away, symbolizing the barriers we were breaking down. Each piece discarded was like shedding the weight of my past, the years of feeling invisible, unappreciated. Here in this room, with these men who had become my unexpected saviors, I was not just Elena, the caretaker of a man lost to his own demons. Here I was alive, vibrant, and in command of my own narrative. The intimacy was not just about the physical closeness. It was about feeling seen, about the warmth of being needed, about forging bonds in the crucible of our mutual desperation. The act itself was a whirlwind, a storm of sensations that left me breathless. A storm that was both liberating and terrifying in its intensity. Morning came too soon, with the harsh light of day revealing the reality of what had transpired. Mike and Steve left quietly, leaving me with a mix of relief and dread. The silence of the house was deafening now, the absence of their presence palpable. I stood at the window, watching their car disappear down the road, the dust settling behind them like the aftermath of our night together. The question of how this secret would change the dynamics of our lives hung heavy in the air. Would it be a one-time escape, a moment of madness that we would all agree to forget? Or would it be the beginning of something new, something that could either mend or further fracture the fragile threads of our relationships? I felt a pang of guilt as I looked at Tom, still asleep, unaware of the storm that had passed through his home. But beneath the guilt was a burgeoning sense of empowerment. I had made a choice to reclaim something for myself, to step out of the shadows of neglect and into a space where I was the protagonist of my own story. The cost of their kindness was now clear. It wasn't just about fixing a car or settling a debt. It was about the bonds we forge, the sacrifices we make, and the paths we choose when the road ahead is uncertain. The night had changed us, altered the course of our lives in ways we couldn't yet fully comprehend. But in that moment, with the echoes of our shared intimacy still lingering, I felt a peace I hadn't known in years. A peace that came from stepping into the unknown, from choosing to live rather than merely exist. Years have passed since that night, a night that changed the fabric of our lives in ways none of us could have predicted. Tom's condition worsened over time, his health deteriorating until he passed away. It was a somber time, filled with reflections on what had been and what could have been. Now, at 75, I look back on that night with a complex mix of regret and understanding. Mike and Steve, now older and grayer, still visit occasionally. They come with their tools, not just to fix my car but to share a piece of our past, to keep the memory of Tom alive in the only way they know how. Their visits are no longer about the physical closeness we once shared. Instead, they've evolved into something unspoken but deeply understood. In the quiet of my home, we sit with our drinks, the warmth of the fire casting long shadows across the room. The laughter that once filled these walls has been replaced by a more subdued camaraderie. We talk about the old days, about Tom, about the life we all once knew. There's a comfort in this, in knowing that someone else remembers those times, someone else understands the weight of the past. Our relationship has transcended the physical. It's about companionship now, about the shared history that binds us. When Mike fixes something around the house, or Steve brings over a new book he thinks I might like, there's an unspoken acknowledgement of our past. A silent agreement that what happened was a moment out of time, a chapter closed but not forgotten. The significance of this ongoing relationship in the twilight of our lives is profound. It's a testament to the resilience of human connection, to the idea that relationships can evolve, heal, and grow beyond their initial form. We've moved from a place of need and desperation to one of mutual respect and care. There's a lesson in this, I think, as I watch Mike's now weathered hands adjust the carburetor on my car, or see Steve's eyes light up when he shares a story from his travels. It's about forgiveness, not just for each other but for ourselves. We've all made choices, some we regret, others we cherish, but all have shaped us. In these moments, I realize the true cost of their kindness wasn't just about fixing a car or settling a debt. It was about understanding, about the bonds we forge in times of need, and the paths we choose when the road ahead is uncertain. It's about the sacrifices we make, not just for ourselves, but for the people we care about, even if those sacrifices are born from complex, sometimes morally ambiguous places. As we sit in silence, the fire crackling, I feel a peace I hadn't known in years. It's not the peace of forgetting, but of acceptance, of living with the choices we've made. The night that changed everything now feels like a distant memory, yet its echoes are here, in the quiet companionship, in the shared drink, in the knowing looks we exchange. This relationship signifies more than just the passage of time. It's a reminder of our shared humanity, of the capacity to love, to forgive, and to find solace in the company of those who have seen us at our most vulnerable. It's about the comfort of knowing someone else remembers, someone else cares, and in that, there's a profound sense of not being alone in the world, even as we age, even as we face the end. Thank you for staying with us. If you find it interesting and useful, please subscribe, like, and share so you don't miss the next video. Thanks.